Hey everybody, Dr. Shook here. Hope you're doing well tonight. All right, so it is 9:34. So by 10 o'clock we're going to be finished. Okay, this is a topic that can expand as are all topics that I talk about, because everything that we discuss is based on the concept of looking at a symptom and then tying together how systems of the body can break down and contribute to the manifestation of that symptom. And when you look at this from a systems-based approach, looking at several and as many systems of the body as possible, how they might dysfunction and lead to the problems that result in the manifestation of your symptoms, it gets very complex, and there are a lot of working and moving parts and pieces. So what I want to do is try to be as efficient as possible. And I want to address a really common symptom. Now, I've talked about this a little bit before, but I've got a few other things that I want to expand on today. Hi, Christine. Hey, Patricia. Hi, Lori. Hope you guys are all doing well. So, all right, we're going to talk about heartburn, okay? Now, this is super common in people that have a low thyroid, hypothyroidism. This is very common in people that have Hashimoto's. Matter of fact, this is common in just about everybody. Heartburn, okay? GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, okay? It's estimated that 90% of the population have heartburn. 90%. It's like, when we talk about hypothyroidism, right? People that have a low thyroid, 90% is from Hashimoto's. I read some really cool research today on that, which I don't want to digress. I'll talk about that in another video. But really cool research on Hashimoto's and being seronegative. I don't want to talk about it a lot. I'll just say this. The research showed that you can have autoimmunity isolated to an organ and have zero antibodies. But when they do, and I talked about this some yesterday, and I've talked about it periodically, when they do biopsies, they can see the Hashimoto's all through the gland. It's gland isolated autoimmunity. It's not humoral. It's not in the blood. So that research is not really relevant to what we're talking about here. I mean, it is, because this is super common in people that have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, because guess what? Not many people realize this, but most people that have heartburn, you have it because you don't have a high enough concentration of stomach acid, right? Most people think that they have heartburn because they have too much acid. So they take an antacid and they feel better because they've neutralized some of the acid. But the reality is that most people the symptoms of too much acid and not enough acid are the same. Okay, they are the same. And you can feel better taking an antacid, because when you regurgitate acid, even if it's in a lower concentration, up into your esophagus, it burns. When you take an antacid, it coats your esophagus and helps neutralize that acid that's burning your esophagus, even if it's of lower concentration than you need. Okay? The symptoms are the same. Okay? Most people that have heartburn have it because they don't have enough acid. And I'm telling you right now that these PPIs and these antacids are some of the most psychologically addictive medications that people can take. You try to come off of them, and these things, the effect when you come off of some of these medications, it doesn't happen instantly, but people report symptoms within 12 hours when the medication is still in their system. It's crazy. Anyway, I digress there. But here's the deal: a lot of people have heartburn. So many people have digestive problems, right? And this is, when you think of digestive dysfunction and you think of problems with bloating and irritable bowels and diarrhea and yeast overgrowth and all these other issues, what we're talking about is where the entire process begins. If you don't have enough or a high enough concentration of stomach acid, then your digestion, everything below the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, it is all dysfunctional. it contributes to so many problems. So let's talk about this a little bit, okay? So, the most common approach is to take antacids, and that can actually be like one of the worst things that you do because it further neutralizes the acid that you have, making it lower, which contributes more to reflux and regurgitation. So let me kind of give you the rundown on how this reflux occurs with low acid. Okay, so here's a scenario that you'll see occur. So let's say that the person is hypothyroid, right? Or they have Hashimoto's, right? So they have poor responsiveness. It can be, any of the ways that the physiology, that thyroid physiology breaks down. Let's say it can be any of those ways. Like, there are over 24 different ways where the thyroid physiology can break down, from production, transportation, sensitivity, and detoxification, right? Over 24 different ways. Most people only are familiar with the quantity of hormone in circulation. That's all that they're familiar with because that's all that anyone has ever talked to them about. But let's say that they have poor thyroid hormone physiology. That could be low thyroid hormone. It could be they have high inflammatory levels and they're not responsive or sensitive to the hormone. But let's say they have poor thyroid hormone physiology. So their body doesn't respond to it as well. Well, one of the symptoms that you're going to see with hypothyroidism or poor thyroid hormone physiology is poor ability to concentrate stomach acid. Okay, poor ability to concentrate it. You'll have acid, but it's not concentrated highly enough. So what happens is when you eat your food, that food goes down the esophagus, it goes into the stomach, and it sits there in this low concentration of acid. So what usually happens when the acid is higher in concentration, when the food gets into the stomach, the sphincter at the top of the stomach and the bottom of the stomach, the sphincters tighten up. It's a muscular valve. They tighten up, and then the stomach starts churning. It churns, and it's this process of mechanical mixing of the stomach acid with the food. Helps to break it down. Well, guess what happens when the stomach acid is lower in concentration? You have, see that closing of those sphincters, those muscular valves in the stomach, that's a neurological reflex. And it's stimulated by the concentration of stomach acid. So when that stomach acid is lower in concentration, you may not get the tightening and closing off of those valves as well. So then the stomach churns, you got this low concentration of acid, and as it churns and squeezes, you might get squirting or regurgitation of that food up into the stomach. Okay? That food and acid mix. So what happens? It burns, even though it's low concentration acid. Okay, even though it's low concentration acid, so it burns, and then you might reach for a chewable antacid or something, or a liquid, and you swallow it, and it coats that, and it neutralizes it. And in your mind, you're like, "Yep, I had too much acid." The reality is, no, you didn't. Most people do not. Most people do not. Most people don't have enough acid. If you would increase that acid, now maybe not at that point, right? When it's already in your esophagus, that's a very palliative thing to do. It makes it feel better to take an antacid, but you cannot continue down that road because there are a lot of consequences to taking these antacids. There's so many problems. We'll talk about them in a second. So what ends up happening is you get this regurgitation, this process. It's a vicious cycle. So you have to address, obviously, like if it's hypothyroidism that's leading to that, then you have to address, or it's an inflammatory process. There are so many different ways that the physiology can break down, right? It doesn't have to be hypothyroidism. It could be high inflammatory level that makes your body less sensitive to the thyroid hormone, and then that leads to poor concentration of stomach acid. It could be high stress and high cortisol that contributes to poor thyroid hormone conversion. And there's a ton of different things. And then there could be other issues with the stomach, right? You could have H. pylori, a bacterial infection of the stomach. You could have, which one of the things it does is it shuts down and decreases and diminishes the ability of the stomach to concentrate acid, because the bacteria thrive in a lower acid environment. So your stomach acid's actually protective. It's protective against bacterial infections. It's protective against yeast overgrowth, parasites. And when you have this lower concentration, everything below the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, becomes susceptible to bacterial overgrowth, because you end up, so what ends up happening is when your stomach acid is lower concentration, and then the food finally stomach finishes with it, and it starts to move into, it leaves the stomach, the first place it goes is into the small intestine, okay? And then the small intestine eventually empties into the large intestine, and then your sigmoid colon, so the very end of your large intestine, and then it exits the rectum when you void it, and you have a bowel movement, okay? So when it moves from the stomach into the small intestine, if you have low concentrations of stomach acid, you will get poor stimulation of your pancreas, which sits right there. Your pancreas releases digestive enzymes, which help to break down food and help you to extract nutrients from it. Now, the hydrochloric acid, which is the stomach acid, is incredibly important for the absorption of B vitamins and iron and minerals. And so if you don't have that in adequate concentrations, well, then you might end up being like nutrient deficient, just because you're not extracting the nutrients from the food, which we already have problems with, because most of the foods, most of the vegetables and things are much lower in concentration of the topsoil minerals, because they're just depleted from farming it for so long. So we already have a lot of disadvantages there, so it can lead further to nutrient deficiencies. And then the acid itself, if it's not concentrated enough, the pancreas doesn't get stimulated, so you don't get a really good release of enzymes that help you to break down carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And then you can have fermentation, because those sugars, if they're not digested well, then they can start to ferment. You can have bacterial colonies that overgrow, which we call dysbiosis, and that causes, you can have bloating, or you can have diarrhea, you can have constipation. It can lead to things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which SIBO for short. The acid is also really important. The acid concentration is also really important for the release of bile from the liver and the gallbladder. Now, that's really important for a lot of different reasons. That's part of, a lot of your hormones that are being metabolized and passed through the detoxification processes in the liver. They come out in the bile, and they're eliminated that way, for one thing. Bile is also really, really important for fat emulsification. So the absorption of fat. And guess what? If you can't absorb fat, you're going to have some problems with some vitamins and minerals, because you have fat-soluble vitamins, meaning you have to absorb the fat. You have to absorb these vitamins with fat. That's vitamins A, D, E, and K. So this is a huge issue. You see how important and foundational the stomach acid is as a starting point, right? It's a starting point. Like, you're going to have dysfunction, very likely to have dysfunction the rest of the GI tract. Also, the acid, I mentioned already, it gives you protective benefit, so that if the acid's high enough and you eat something with bacteria on it, or a parasite, eggs, or something like that, it gets into your stomach, the acid has the higher concentration of acid is going to be more likely to kill it. Okay, normal concentrations of acid. So these are, some of the things, like you can just be a lot more susceptible to pathogenic infections, to bacterial overgrowth, to major changes in the GI tract bacteria, simply because you're not able to digest these fibers, some of the fibers in the food. You're not able to digest the carbohydrates. These things ferment, bacteria colonies change. It's really interesting how it all works together. This is, it can cause a lot of problems too, like with, you might not have good activation of intrinsic factor, which is released by the chief cells of the stomach. And intrinsic factor is required for the absorption of B12. See, a lot of people have B12 problems. A lot of people have, and a lot of people with Hashimoto's, they actually have autoimmunity against. They can make antibodies that block the absorption of B12 with pernicious anemia. It's pretty common with Hashimoto's. You see it. If someone has additional autoimmune conditions, it's very easy to see pernicious anemia. It's also very interesting that you'll see more cases of like gastritis or inflamed gastric lining, which can be due to parietal cell antibodies, the autoimmunity against the cells that actually make your stomach acid. You see that a lot more commonly with Hashimoto's. That's part of like the triad, like Hashimoto's triad. You'll see those more commonly, and celiac falls under that that triad as well. It's Hashimoto's, pernicious anemia, and celiac disease, more commonly seen together. So that can be something that happens. And if you can't absorb B12, then you can develop macrocytic anemia, like large. I talked about this yesterday some, but interestingly, these topics kind of merge. A lot of things do start coming together. So that's really important. So it's really, it's critical for so many different aspects of digestion. And if you don't get that, if you don't optimize that acid concentration, you're going to have problems. It's very common. One of the things that I'll tend to do foundationally with people when I'll change their diet. First of all, I mean, we usually see when someone has heartburn or reflux, when they follow the dietary recommendations that I give them, they utilize the nutritional supplementation, and then they'll follow the lifestyle recommendations. Most of the time, we dramatically improve digestion, because I'll usually recommend a digestive enzyme that has some HCl in it. So talking about, before we get into that, let me just mention some of the common symptoms. So how would you know? Well, obviously heartburn, like we're talking about, heartburn is a sign that you could have low stomach acid. Now we're going to talk about a few other things, because it's important to know that that's not the only thing that causes heartburn, right? You can have other issues. You can have, we'll talk about those in a second, but so like things like burping, bloating, if you have gas, if you feel nauseous, if you have undigested food in your stool, like if you have a bowel movement, you look in the toilet and you see undigested fibers and you can make out your food, it's probably not good stomach acidity. You're not breaking down the food. And make sure that you're chewing. I mean, this is so underappreciated. Like chewing your food, like people get in such a hurry that they just gulp. It's like they chew 2 or 3 times and they swallow. Don't do that. Don't do that, please. The chewing process, the process of chewing is actually a neurological activity that primes the digestive tract and tells your brain and tells your digestive tract that food is on the way. Make a conscious effort. Like, listen, I'm going to tell you, minimum chew every bite 10 times. Ideally, chew every bite 30 times. Okay? Take some time, breathe, because here's the deal. When you're eating, that should be activating the parasympathetic nervous system. It's part of your involuntary nervous system. It's called the autonomic system. Okay, there are primarily 2 divisions here, 2 divisions of that autonomic system. The parasympathetic nervous system we commonly refer to as the rest and digest system. So when it is activated, you'll get better recovery. Your physiology changes. Okay, and it's more conducive to digestion and recovery. It's extremely important. Okay, in today's world, everyone people are not getting into that parasympathetic state, that they're stuck in the fight or flight state. That is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. These cannot be activated at the same time. If you're in fight or flight mode and you're stimulated and driven sympathetically, that involuntary nervous system is activated, then you don't have good parasympathetic activity. You won't make gastric juices. You won't have as efficient peristalsis, which is the smooth wave-like contractions that move food through the digestive tract. This is all really important. Like you've got to take this into consideration. Okay, chewing primes the gut. Like so, in the transformation challenge that we do, that we've done, this is our second round that we're going through now. That is a great place for you to consider starting if you're trying to figure out these things. Like we've already taken a lot of these ideas and these concepts and we've integrated them into a system to try to make it as simple as possible. And one of the modules in there, I talk about this. I talk about priming the digestive tract. And I'll actually have people chew like some of these, it's like a type of like gum. And there's you can get like sugar alcohol based gums. You got to be careful if you have SIBO or some other issues. But primarily like a sugar alcohol based gum, and they chew like 5 minutes before they eat. Like just start chewing, and it primes the gut. It starts activating the vagus nerve, and it's priming the gut. And I'll have them do that. And you don't have to necessarily do it forever, but if you're having problems with digestion, I recommend priming the gut. It's a neurological activity to try to ramp up the digestive tract and prepare you for better, for get the body ready, get the gut ready for food. It's a signal. Because when you chew, you're activating all these nerves that fire directly into the brainstem, where the vagus nerve originates. Now, the vagus nerve is the nerve that leaves the brainstem and goes into your entire digestive tract and controls it and signals all the hormone production and everything. So chewing, isn't this amazing how the body works? Chewing, that neurological signaling, the firing of those nerves, that it signals the brain and it prepares the gut. Is that not so cool? I think that's so cool that our body works like that. So, what you really want to do is prepare the body, right? You want to prepare it for this food that's on its way. Now, so some of the things that we'll do, and some of the things that I recommend, like in the transformation challenge that we do, and what I'll often recommend to people is, that we'll take enzymes with their food, with meals, and that those enzymes typically have HCl in them. Sometimes we'll just recommend HCl by itself. HCl is it's stomach acid. Basically, you get it in a capsule, and it ramps up, it increases, helps to support stomach acid. Now, we will often go through a process where we will recommend increasing the dose until you get a warming sensation, and then you back off one capsule, and then you stay at that dose until the warming sensation comes back, and then you back off, and you kind of titrate down. And taking that additional acid helps to encourage the stomach to make more on its own. So the goal is to kind of jumpstart that, encourage the stomach to make more acid, and then taper off of it as the stomach acid production comes online and is more efficient. Now, sometimes people will take these enzymes, or they'll take HCl, and they'll take one capsule, and their stomach will burn. Okay, if anything like that happens, then we know, like, okay, they could have stomach ulcers, which is very common with low stomach acid, because a lot of people will have H. pylori infections. It's a bacterial infection that decreases stomach acid concentration. They could have a thin gastric lining. They could have an autoimmune gastritis. That we've seen that before. That's possible. And people can have cancers too. These are all possibilities, less likely, but it's reality. Recurring reflux leads to changes in the esophagus. I don't know if you've heard of Barrett's esophagus, but it's where the lower part of the esophagus becomes scarred, basically, through this recurring regurgitation of acid, and it burns the tissues, and they basically scar, and it becomes constricted. And then people will, when they try to swallow food, it'll get stuck there, and sometimes they'll go in and try to do these ballooning procedures, but that can lead to tissue damage, and it can contribute to the development of cancer. H. pylori is known to contribute to gastric carcinoma, and so these are all things that are, they're things that we can do a lot about, but we don't want to let them go forever. We don't want to just ignore these problems, because there's a lot that can be done for it. There's so much that can be done for it. And the biggest thing, though, is you just have to be willing to make some changes in your life and work through and try to figure out what your unique drivers are. Most of the time, with like some of the recommendations and things that we make in our programs, and some of the things I'm sharing with you guys here, they can be really effective at helping you out to improve your digestion, your reflux, pretty simply. I mean, really, quite frankly, it doesn't have to be dramatic change to your life or anything, but you do have to be willing to make some changes. So those are some of the most important things. But if you're trying to figure this stuff out, and if you've got digestive problems and you've got reflux, I really, really highly encourage you. You should join our transformation challenge. We're starting a new class. The enrollment closes on the 12th of August. Okay, so we're going to take about 50 people. We don't really want a huge class, because we have a closed Facebook group. It's a small one, a small Facebook group where people are joining, and we want to try to support everyone in there without it being too hectic and crazy. with a lot of questions, and I'm trying to we've created our transformation challenge is really a guidebook based and video based program that I've put it together, and it's a 6-week program, and I've tried to make it intentionally as simple as possible. Like really, I can make things I could make it incredibly complex, but that when you're trying to get people to make change, you need to be able to give them the simplest things possible. And I realize that's an art, and I'm always striving to make things easier for people to understand and implement. But that's really the goal of it. Like I almost want it to be as as just simple as possible. I'm constantly trying to refine that and asking for feedback so I can make it even easier. And we have like daily videos. We have several 10 modules that are available each week. I mean, it's a 6-week program, 2 weeks of planning. So we get a lot of time to get organized, 4 weeks of implementation with diet, lifestyle, and temporary nutritional supplementation. I recommend what I've used time and time again with people clinically. I use it myself, the same strategies to really decrease inflammation, improve digestive tract function, and balance and stabilize blood sugar, which really help with immune regulatory function. We see real significant improvements systemically just getting people healthy this way. And so I would encourage you, consider doing that. I mean, literally, you can join the challenge. If you wanted to just join the challenge and go through the program, just the 6 weeks with the videos and the guidebooks and a ton of like really great information that we have put together over years and years of experience, you can do that for $1. And there's absolutely no catch to that. I just made it $1 because I said, you know what? I'm not going to give it away free. There has to be some exchange. Like there has to be something. You have to be willing to pay something for it. I just find that when I give stuff away completely like that we work really hard for, too many people, they don't take any action. They don't value it. Even at $1, it's not valued, but I want anyone and everyone to be able to have access to it. That's why we have made it $1. Now, the thing is that it's also a challenge. So it's a 6-week challenge. And once the 6 weeks is up, the challenge is gone, because here's the other thing. When I don't give people time limits, they don't ever take action. They procrastinate. Now this is true. This is true for a lot of people. And you might be saying, well, that's not me. Well, I know people, and I know a lot of people that I've worked with. And when I don't have hard time limits on something, and if they think something's available forever, they won't follow it. They won't take action. There's no urgency. So it's a challenge. But it's not like difficult unless you make it difficult. But if you think about this too, difficulty in a lot of these things are perception. That's your perception of it. So we try to change the way you think and really encourage you in a group environment. And that's a great way to I think it's the best way that I can come up with to help people en masse. I'm trying to figure out how to do that the best possible way. And all I can do is teach like this, which is completely free, and then do some kind of program, something to give you guidance, because I can't be there necessarily every day, but I can record videos and I can create a support group, and we can hold your hand through the process and make it as simple as we possibly can. Now, if you're dealing with these issues and you want like one-on-one help, I mean, I work with people around the world, across the United States, virtually every day. People do come into our office that are more local, but the majority of what we do is we work with people virtually, and we do consulting with them, and we go through really in-depth health history, and we help them figure out what testing it might be appropriate, and we try to look at what's going on and be very complimentary to their current healthcare team, and give them strategy and help them to think about this from a systems-based approach to get them as healthy as possible, to try to optimize their health and physiology, get better immune regulation. We do, I go through a process of detecting, removing, repairing. That's the process we go through. Detecting with health history, super in-depth health history and information gathering, unbelievably detailed. We have you fill out an online intake process, incredibly detailed. And then we go through the detection process. Then based on that data, we try to see what kind of testing might be appropriate, and then we come up with a strategy for getting objective data. So getting reproducible testing so that we can get more specific information on what is actually happening and correlate that and match that with your symptoms. Then from that, when we have that together, then we can formulate a specific strategy based on your bio individuality, what is actually happening to you, right? That's not always an option for people because you can spend hundreds of dollars. You can spend, when you do testing, you can spend several $1,000s. I mean, really, if you do really good testing, you do immune-based testing, and you go really in depth, you're going to be paying out of your pocket for those tests. So not everyone can have access to that. We realize that. So I'm trying to figure out ways, why don't we create like a challenge? Why don't we take our lessons and things that we've learned over the years and put them into a program so that every person can have access to the lessons that we have learned and distill that down and try to make that world class. That's what we're doing with our challenge. So that's what I'm trying to do with the challenge. So that's why I encourage you. If you're kind of like, okay, I can't really work one-on-one virtually or do this or do that, then start there. Challenge is a great place to begin. If you want to go like really in depth and try to come up with a very tailored strategy, then working one-on-one is a good idea to do if you can do that. But if you can't, don't stress about it. There are things that can be done, baby steps. And if there's only thing that you can do is change your diet, that's a great thing to do. So don't worry about it, right? I mean, it's just a step in the right direction. So I'm 5 minutes over. It's 10:05. Bedtime, right? So lifestyle is an important part of what we teach, like in the transformation program. It's important. The rhythms of life, syncing up your biology with the daily circadian rhythms, primarily sun up, sundown, is incredibly important. And our modern lifestyle has completely disrupted that. Our modern lifestyle, these screens, these lights, the blue lights, this would not happen in a natural environment. Sun would go down. How would we light the environment around us prior to electricity? How would we do it? Do it with fire. There's really very, very little or no blue light spectrum from that. The blue light comes from the sun. Blue light hits your retina. It suppresses melatonin production. People don't sleep well. I mean, we live in a modern lifestyle that's amazing. It gives us all these amazing tools and information at our fingertips. But at the same time, I don't think it's extremely congruent with our physiology. And so we want to talk about these concepts, whether or not we can implement them 100% or not. It's one thing. I try to teach all those concepts, like how do we integrate these things, making some changes is a good place to start. It doesn't have to be everything under the sun. Just making some changes is a good place to start. So anyway, hopefully this is helpful. We can talk about this forever. There's a lot of really interesting topics and so many things tie into this. But I wanted to share this with everyone. Hopefully it's been helpful. Let's see. Charmaine, Laura, Ellen, Patrice, hope you are doing well. Hey, Jody, you are welcome. If you guys are interested in like signing up for the challenge, you can go to thyroid. I'm going to see if I can post it. Go to thyroidprogram.com. I just posted a link. Thanks, Joanne. Hope you have a good night too. You're welcome, Jody. You can go to thyroidprogram.com. If you're interested in like maybe working with me as a virtual consultant, you can go to Hashimoto's consult. I'll type that one. I'll see if I can post that. Now, if you're on like YouTube or something, these will not post. You just the text, like just type in like any of these things like thyroidprogram.com. You can learn about the challenge. You can go to our website at Dr. Brad Shook, drbradShook.com, and you can click on application for care page and learn about virtual consulting and kind of how that works, and the fees for the first appointment. All those details are there if you're interested in those things. But if nothing else, take this information and contemplate it. There's a lot of other videos you can research. We have a ton of free resources for you out there, hundreds of videos, on Facebook, at the office of Dr. Brad Shook under the videos tab. You can go to YouTube. to the Hashimoto's doctor with Dr. Shook, Brad Shook, and you'll be able to see a lot of the videos there. I mean, all these live streams should be on YouTube, should be on Facebook, should be, for you to search through, and hopefully it will help point you in the right direction, give you some ideas so that you can be more empowered to help yourself, because it's our mission, remember, to help one person at a time, because if we do that, we help you, it will help your family, that will make a positive impact on your community, and ultimately change the world just by working with one person at a time. It can make a big difference. If we can help you to improve your quality of life, improve your health, you as an individual impact a lot of other people, and we can make a big difference together. So I want you to be your own advocate. I want you to think smart about things. I want you to not be adversarial with your doctors. I want you to try to be a better partner with your healthcare providers. Understand that they do not get training in a systems-based approach. That's fine. They don't. And they are an essential part of our healthcare team to help us with disease, to help us with so many different aspects of health. Very important. So we want to be complementary, and we want to try to be positive with everything that we do, because life's too short to be upset about everything, right? You said that a lot of it's a choice. It's all how you look at it, right? So we want to do the best that we can to be positive as we can, and do the right thing. So anyway, if y'all have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Post your questions, comments here, and I'll try to respond. But let's all try to go to bed on time. That's one of the best things you can do to set you up for a good day tomorrow. So I do appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have a wonderful night. Great to hang out and talk to you. Thank you for all the wonderful comments, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks.